Greetings, outcasts, freethinkers, narrative questioners, dot connectors, and genuinely open-minded and outright curious inhabitants of whatever realm we exist in at the moment. You are about to embark on another free first-hour episode of
The Melt.
If you find yourself wanting to dig deeper and have the desire to join the conversation during our monthly Melt meetups, you might want to consider becoming a monthly subscriber. For as little as 3 lousy Babylon hokey-pokey tokens per month, you can have access to full-length, early, and exclusive episodes. Just visit patreon.com/themeltpodcast or click the link in the episode notes to set the process in motion. It's simple, painless, and very well might make you feel tingly inside. So without further ado, please enjoy the show!
This is Hunter Muse.
And this is Chris Snipes, and you are listening
to The Melt.
There is a forgotten etymological art which almost functions like spellcasting. I suppose all words are a form of spell weaving, as they can be used to not only manifest the internal to the external, but to achieve a desired effect, whether that be to incite rage, seduce a lover, or provoke action. Words can intoxify or disgust. Words can also change the meaning depending on their context. Sometimes meanings change as the times change. What might be an insult in one circumstance might be a term of endearment in another. Words can also be used to manipulate, especially when their original meaning has been forgotten. When one drifts into the world of legal fictions, words can take on meanings that feel more like deciphering code when we attempt to plumb their true intent. Today's guest, Kallenbach, is a master at revealing the true intent of the words and documents that have purposefully enslaved us solely based on our ignorance. Kurt posits that our birth certificated person and our division from our whole self, starting with the premature cutting of our umbilical cords, have sent us down a fictional rabbit hole that has us bowing to those who have intentionally pulled the wool over our eyes. I start off the conversation by asking Kurt about what it is that is happening at the time of birth.
No baby is birthed. They birth the extra embryonic material that includes the placenta. So the birth certificate is not for the baby. The birth itself is not for the baby. The baby is not birthed. The extra embryonic presumed waste material is birthed. So the birth certificate is not for the baby. The birth certificate is for the afterbirth. Okay. So again, birth itself, birth is not an attributable term to the living. A birth is for a decedent estate or biology that has died since baby was taken home. Yeah, that's what gives rise to that straw man, that so-called straw man account.
Okay.
Okay.
So from fertilization.
The concept that they have been promoting for ages is intelligent design, meaning that there's some omniscient, omnipotent God that puts it all together. What I've discovered over the years is that intelligent design is a reality, but so is evolution. So I call it the point where Darwin meets God. And what it is actually is you got this incredible information. We'll call it DNA. And that information is the intelligence behind the construction of the being. And that's the intelligence. That's the intelligent design. And so we'll call the DNA the godly aspect or the intelligent design of the being. But once fertilization or life begins, which is the act of creation, which is, again, that intelligence, from that moment on, which is, well, let's just say what is created. Fertilization is a process. The product of fertilization, or the product of that process, is the zygote, the singularity, that single cell. That single cell has all the information that is necessary for a lifetime of evolutionary process, all in one cell. So that one cell, that singularity, that zygote is the origin of the species, because fertilization is species specific. That means that when my dad dropped off building materials at a job site called my mom's womb, there was no chance a monkey was coming out of my mom's womb.
Yeah.
It's species specific.
Yes.
So that's the intelligence behind the design. But again, that's what we're looking at. From that moment on, that zygote is generationally subdividing. Billions of subdivisions from that moment to this moment as you and I speak, or the three of us. What you're speaking to right now is the Lord and Master over a universe that is my biological entirety. I am the Lord and Master. I am the Lord. I'm the spirit behind trillions of individual cells. Workings going on right now in my inner universe, which is inside the skin of the being that I now occupy. So this is a kind of a scary thought. I mean, and when it came to me a few years ago that I am actually a collective. I'm a collective. I think of myself as a singular, but what I have is trillions of constituents called cells.
Yeah.
And each of those constituents have their own community, be it a liver, a heart, lungs. Those are all individual communities of cells that work together inside this universe. It's frightening when you realize that you are not what you think you are. You are a collective, even as an individual.
And that's not only on a physical level, but on a spiritual level too, right?
Well, kind of yes and no, because I, the Lord and Master over this universe, I don't share this universe with you ever. This particular 46 chromosome universe never, none of the biology of this universe is ever shared, which is why it can't ever become the Borg or part of some collective biologically. Now, what they've done is they've cut a piece off of me, and let's just say at the hospital level, they take that as a biohazardous material, and then they throw it in the incinerator, let's say, or throw it in a specific incinerator, which reduces my biology down to pure carbon. Now, what you're left with is ash at that point. But what is the chemical makeup of ash? What is the chemical makeup of carbon? 6 electrons, 6 protons, and 6 neutrons. 6, 6, 6. So when they reduce by fire the human remains that is left behind at the hospital, they reduce it to 666. People don't understand that, when they say ashes to ashes, dust to dust, they mean it. They're going to collectivize the ash of all the humans and put it into one singular pit, let's call it. So now that ash is what used to be a living piece of me that was amputated now is reduced to ash, and it's given a title. That title is what you know as the birth certificate.
Yes.
So now think about claiming that ash-based certificate that has no breath, no water, no biology, no life as you.
How does that work? I'm sorry to interrupt you, Kurtis, but how does that work with the cord blood and now them taking the placenta and putting that in pill form? Because in some hospitals, they're doing that now with the afterbirth.
Well, I think, and I don't want to get sidetracked here on all of the things they do with that fetal material. First of all, it's not theirs to do it with. So right off the bat, the fact that they have any of my fetal biology or that they've taken any of it from me, that's a crime at a level most people don't understand. In fact, by them putting a title to it or patenting it, which I believe has happened, I'll explain that in a second, they have ultimately destroyed me as a whole. I don't exist. Only one of me can ever exist at any one point in space or time. So if the Kurtis Richard Kallenbach birth certificated person exists, then I don't. And so they've killed me. That's a form of genocide on paper. So if they make any claims upon me, especially after everything I've done, that would be an obvious crime. To anybody else, it probably wouldn't be, because most people don't have any clue that a piece of them is missing. In fact, it's the piece that gives rise to the birth certificate that they claim as themselves. Again, a mistake. So as far as in pill form or anything like that, cord blood or any of that, I post some pretty interesting things on Facebook, but I do notice a lot of people don't really understand the simplicity of what I'm trying to get across. And I think the simplicity of what I'm trying to get across is it's a biblical verse. It's probably my favorite one. And by the way, I'm not a religious guy, just an FYI. I might know God at this point, but I'm not religious. And my favorite is Luke 5:31. It's out of the King James Version, and it is, they that are whole need not a physician. That's the words of Jesus. So they that are whole, W-H-O-L-E, need not a physician, which means physician by every definition. I don't need to be fixed if I'm not broken. And what's interesting about the verse that comes just prior to that is Luke 5:30. And basically I'm paraphrasing now, it's some guys asking Jesus, hey, why do you eat with the sinners and the publicans? And that's when Jesus says, hey, they that are whole need not a physician. Well, then you understand, once you learn the definition of sinner or definition of publican, you'll realize what's actually happening. I mean, you'll realize what original sin is. And a publican is a Jewish tax collector. Well, doesn't everybody file taxes every year? Aren't they collecting taxes for somebody? They think that they're just filing taxes, but they become the tax collector. They're all publicans. If you're filling out an IRS form, you're a publican. So automatically Jesus is required in your life, because he says, they that are whole need not a physician. But if you're a publican, you're not whole. That's what he's saying. Next thing he says is, I eat with sinners. Well, by definition, what's a sin? What's a sinner? It's a debtor. So if you're not a debtor, if you're whole, you're not a debtor. You don't owe any debts. So again, Jesus is very, very explicit, but everybody thinks this is about something else. It's not. It's about being whole. The entire world is run by those that understand this. When you're whole, you're actually, and I don't use this word very often, but you are both sides of the coin, your heads and tails. Think about it. If fertilization is the beginning, it's heads. The product of fertilization is the zygote. That's heads. I think of everything inside the womb as heads, and then everything outside the womb as tails. Everything inside the womb, Old Testament, everything outside the womb, New Testament. So when you put both those together as an unbroken, a biological continuity without cutting the cord, you have the whole coin, heads and tails. If you cut the umbilical cord, you have, in effect, clipped the coin, which is illegal. So again, heads and tails together is the sovereign coin. That's the sovereign. Sovereignty is based upon wholeness. It's really that simple. And if you're sovereign, or if you have the sovereign, you can pay the bill. If you aren't whole, if you're broken, then you are missing a piece of the coin, or you have clipped the coin, or you have accepted a clipped coin, which is deficient in its value. And if it's deficient, you can't pay the bill. So now you're part of the welfare state just by claiming the birthday.
And the birthday and the birth certificate is what puts you in the system.
Well, the birthday is a lie by omission.
Yeah, omitting the 9 months previous.
Absolutely. You've actually omitted not only your godly origin, but you've also omitted the origin of the species, the zygote. So what are you left with if you don't have both your origin or the thing created? What are you left with? You're left with a biblical narrative. You're left with a story. You're left with something that lacks substance. You're a ghost.
And it seems like disavowing that connection from our very beginnings allows us to sort of classify that as something different altogether, which allows for people wanting abortions and not thinking twice about it, classifying that pre-delivered person. I don't know if I'm using the right words.
No, you're onto something there. But let me tell you what an abortion is. The birthday is an abortion. People don't realize that when they amputate that piece of you, it becomes a partial birth abortion. So the birth certificated person is an abortion. So, I mean, that's why they had to change the term fertilization to conception, because for those 5, 6, 7 days prior to implantation, you're whole. So from fertilization all the way up until prior to implanting into the wall of the uterus, you are a singular entity. And so again, this is hard for most people to understand, but your 46 chromosomes are unmixed. They are unmixed. So you're pure, and pure is innocence, and innocence is the presumption under the law. Remember, you're supposed to be presumed innocent until proven guilty. But the moment you accept the birthday, you've already committed the crime that is beyond that. So you're already guilty. It's almost like when you understand the movie, what was the one that had pre-crime?
Minority Report.
Minority Report.
Yeah.
That Minority Report is the birth certificate. It's the minor. It's the infant that remains an infant forever. And that infancy never allows you to gain the age of majority, which means you're never allowed, any civic or civil aspect, which places you under a guardianship or probate for your entire existence, your entire life. This is really kind of fun. When you get down to the simplicity, you realize that all of the things that they're throwing at everybody all the time is to keep them chasing crazy stuff.
Yes.
But it's simple. It's very simple. In fact, here's my elevator speech. We can end this call right now. Ready?
No.
I know, but this is it. This is the end right here. Okay. It's the beginning and the end.
Okay.
I am all present and accounted for from fertilization to last expired breath.
And that's also similar to what you're supposed to tell somebody if, like, an official, a police officer or something asks for your birth date. You say you claim fertilization as the beginning of your birth.
No,
I mean that is the beginning. Okay, I'll step out of your way and let you.
No, but you know what you see. It's very difficult. I mean, the other day or a couple weeks back, September 19th was that day.
Oh.
And believe me, I really wanted to celebrate it because I always have.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's fun when people recognize you, in that day or that for that thing. But the reality is that's the birth of an infant. Here's something that I never speak of, but it's really fun to think about. See, there's a book out there called Fire in the Minds of Men. And I think it's James Billington. He was a librarian for the Library of Congress for a number of years. And of course, the Library of Congress has all the answers to everything in the world, FYI. So anybody that's a librarian knows all this. Mm-hmm. But he wrote a book called Fire in the Minds of Men, probably one of the most important books I've ever read. And that was a book suggested to me directly by Jordan Maxwell. He told me, you need to read that. Well, there were some things in that book that blew my mind, but there was one word in there that I caught because I already had the eyes to see. And it was the word revolutionary or revolution. Well, when you understand what a revolution is, it's a turning around or turning back or going back. Then you understand what the birthday is. The birthday is returning to that moment, that place, every 365 days. So if you return there every 365 days, at my point, 62 times around the sun, you'd think that I'd be at least 62 years old. But if I keep celebrating infancy, I never go beyond 1 year. So the Revolutionary War of 1770 whatever is actually the creation of the birthday. And these guys knew that. The British bankers, the London Medical Society, when they created that birthday, that concept, that was the Revolutionary War. The Revolutionary War is the birthday. You keep going back or returning to infancy, you can never, ever gain adulthood. You can never reach the age of majority, which means all your property stays in guardianship or probate or some form of trust. And think about this. I'll do one more before I shut the hell up for a second. Imagine a place where there are no men, because no men have moved beyond infancy. No male has ever moved beyond infancy. Now there are no men. There might be guys like you and me out there that biologically look older, but on paper, we never exceed 365 days old. So if there are no men, if there's no men in your life, if there's no real men for the women, what happened? All that's left are women and children. That's all that's left on paper. All that's left in the world are women and children, because the men have been claiming infancy as well. So they never reach the age of majority. So they can't control their own families because only a father, a man, has such rights. But an infant has no such rights. So what they've done on paper is they took away all the men. On paper.
On paper, yes.
By our own admission. Men wonder why they have no power, why they have no authority, why their children are taken away from the families. It's because they're not men. There's nothing but women and children here. On paper.
Mm-hmm. So,
crazy.
Yeah, that is a very interesting way of looking at that. So To the cutting of the cord, the big crime of all of this is that one of the big crimes of this action is that it breaks the continuity of one's life. Lifeline? I don't know what would be the word for that. Can you describe the importance of why that continuity is so important?
Because you can never be dead and come back to life. Think about it this way. Fertilization is the beginning of life. The next 9 months in the womb, you're evolving. You go through, I don't know, embryo, fetus, and now you're the baby. You're 9 months later, you're ready to come out of the womb. I should also say that prior to exiting the womb, everything in the womb is still called fetal. Once baby comes out beyond the vagina, baby is now baby. Everything left behind, umbilical cord all the way back, that's still attached to the wall of the uterus for moments, that's all fetal material. So when they cut that cord, baby's outside in the present, but the rest, residue, and remainder of baby is not baby at all. It's fetal tissue. Even though it's the same material, the same 46 chromosomes, it is a completely separate entity now called fetus. So now there's an unborn fetus and a baby, and yet it's all one thing. That's how they've done it. By creating a terminal end, they have an infant forever, which they call eternal life, by the way. The religious call it eternal life. Of course, eternal life is death because we're mortal beings, so there's no such thing as eternal life for mortal beings. So they created an eternal life infant on paper. And why that's important is that when you cut the cord, I always think of it as a rope. If I've been here, let's say 62 years plus those 9 months, let's think of it that way. That's the easiest way to do this. For every year is 1 foot of rope. So I have one rope that's 62 feet, 9 inches long. That's my life, right? You can picture that, right?
Sure.
But here's what they do. So I have one rope, one life, continuity. There's one end, which is the beginning, and the other end is today.
Mm-hmm.
It's this moment. One end is the beginning. This end is this moment. All one present moment. Because on the other end, it looks like it was way back then. What day was it when that end happened?
It was today then.
It was today.
Yeah.
So this is one long today for the living, because life only exists in the present. So as long as I'm alive, as long as I'm living, that rope evidences one singular present moment, albeit 62 years, 9 months long. Got it?
That's the continuity, yes.
There's continuity, right? And it's biological and it's evolutionary.
Mm-hmm.
It started with one cell in the water and evolved enough for me to step outside of the water, outside of that water-based vessel, onto the land and breathe the air of the new world beyond the womb. But yet I used to be water-based and now I'm land-based. Still following?
Yes.
It's all one being, though.
Yes.
It's that one being, water-based and land-based, is my supreme being. I am the supreme being when I'm whole. What they did is they severed the initial period in the womb. They created a false set of terminal ends. So the front end, the zygotic origin, is way over there. And then at 9 inches, there's a terminal end, the 9 months in the womb, right? And then there's a new beginning that from that beginning outside the womb to this moment as you and I speak, that's 62 feet long. That's from the so-called birthday till here. The point is that those two false terminal ends evidence death, because mortal beings are continuous and contiguous. Not only is it continuous in, let's call it linear time, it's contiguous in biology. I'm all one 46 chromosome entity. When they cut that umbilical cord, they severed, they reduced my entirety to less than whole. And by doing so, they clipped my sovereignty, because my sovereignty is evidenced by a direct link to creation.
Do you think that's why the baby cries?
I think the baby cries because it hurts like hell. I always joke to people that they don't understand that, oh yeah, I'm the dad and I cut my son's umbilical cord. Imagine somebody coming up to any one of us three with a chainsaw and saying, just hold still, I'm taking off your left arm.
Oh my God.
Because that limb, that left arm is a limb, no less than the placenta and umbilical cord were a limb. That's why what I've discovered over the years is that, like the Fifth Amendment, where they talk about double jeopardy and life and limb, that's it. It's already been sacrificed. You never, ever have to be subjected to that birth certificated person again if you understand the Fifth Amendment and what the limb is. Remember in, I think it's High Plains Drifter, Clint Eastwood. Well, people don't realize that he's basically just a spirit that's come back to that town. But remember when he's going through and he's getting all the gear that he needs, and he has his little midget guy with him, which is the afterbirth, by the way, he made mayor. But just like Mini-Me, and I'm not joking, whenever you see the miniature version, that's actually the afterbirth or cut version of you. But remember when he's getting all his gear, and the retailer or whoever the business owner says, well, that'll be, and he goes, no charge. It's because the bill has already been paid. He paid for that with his life. And that's what we've done. That's what that sacrificial lamb, that's what that cut is supposed to be. It's supposed to be that sacrifice that evidences our participation in a certain type of society. Well, again, that sacrifice, biblically, they talk about, the Lamb of God. Well, guess what's in that afterbirth? Guess what's in that placenta? A portion of your amnion. And the Greek word for amnion is lamb. So the sacrificial lamb is your membrane, your fetal membrane called amnion. That's the sacrificial lamb. So by allowing this cut to occur, but to stay on deposit, it becomes the sacrifice or the sacrificial lamb that actually evidences all bills paid.
Can I ask a question?
Unless, of course, you abandon that lamb or forsaken that lamb. Now you're just a pauper, vagabond, or fugitive from justice.
So what is the prime difference between this cut that takes place before the placenta is birthed or it comes out of the vagina and the same situation, only the afterbirth coming out of the vagina and then it dissipating, dissolving, however it does, naturally and separating from the baby? What separates those two things? Because they both end up being separated. One is just by a blade, and one is just organically.
Oh, that's a great question. Man, I could have used about 10 more cups of coffee. No, because hyper focus is how I live. And these are the nuances, in these kinds of calls to me are very important. This is a really tough one. What you're describing, okay, let me try to help you with a little bit of imagination. This is important because when you understand that the biology, baby, umbilical cord, and extraembryonic material is all one biology, it's all one estate.
Yes.
It's a singular being. It's a supreme being. Now picture this. Baby crowns and comes out of the womb. Baby is in view. There are witnesses to baby. It's called the present. So baby is in the present. But the rest, residue, and remainder of baby's estate has yet to come. It's not in the present, is it? In fact, if it all comes out as one unit and considered one unit, then you, baby, are fully present. But that's not how they do things. What they do is they let baby come out, they clamp and cut the cord, and then the rest, residue, and remainder comes out at some other point in time and space. Now there are two different moments. The rest, residue, and remainder then goes on the record, on the record, and there's a timestamp on it. In my case, that timestamp was September 19th, 1960 at 3:50 a.m. That timestamp never changes. That material at that moment is frozen in time. It never moves. So Kurtis Richard Kallenbach is frozen 62 plus years ago in the past. And yet I'm present. So what they've found a way to do is divide us from ourselves. They literally created a split personality. One is the pound of flesh that Shakespeare spoke about in the Merchants of Venice, the pound of flesh put on deposit for a commercial vessel. So they took that 1.1 pound average placenta as the pound of flesh that is securing your commercial vessel that you see as, usually I believe it's the all caps name. That's the commercial vessel. So again, your biology now, because of that cut, that split, it's more than just temporal. It's more than just a time problem. It's a space problem. Because that biology is also left behind. So think about why these pseudo intellects or this false science, I believe the Jesuits are behind all this, but that's okay. The Jesuits are not actually the enemy. The enemy of us is ignorance. Mm-hmm. There are no enemies. Truth has no enemy. The moment you know truth, you can honestly be a pacifist because there are no enemies to truth. That's the beauty of truth. Think about this. It's already true. How can you be contrary to truth?
Self-evident.
You can only be a subset. Hell, even lies are within truth. They're just omissions. If everything is everything and you're just not telling me all of it, that lie is only by an omission of the rest. That's what we're talking about here. So by not knowing, i.e. ignorance, by not knowing your godly origin, by not knowing the origin of the species, you have become a co-conspirator in the demise of your own estate. You're actually Judas to your own Jesus.
Mind blowing. So how do you get yourself back?
You're already here.
But
this is the best part. Have you not still been using that exact same biology from fertilization to this moment?
Indeed.
So you've never abandoned it, have you? You've always occupied it. You've always been the caretaker, Mr. Torrance. That was from The Shining.
Yes, it was. But I can't get my afterbirth back or my core.
You don't need to. You actually, by breathing, you've inspired the entirety of that biology from the beginning. You don't need to get anything because you've never lost it. You're still using it. That's the best part. people don't realize that you're not trying to get anything back because you still have it. That biology that was cut off of you, you don't need it anymore. Not that biology. You don't live underwater anymore. You don't need that material. But the presence, when you understand presence all the way back to origin, I mean, what day was it that your mom and dad lay together?
Good question.
I actually
It was
know.
today.
Yeah, she actually does know.
I do.
Well, no, it's today. I know. I don't even know you guys, and I know. Because the answer is always today.
Right.
Sure.
So mom and dad did nothing yesterday. Mom and dad did nothing 62 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
Mom and dad, when they did it, it was the present moment called today. And so if you're using or claiming any timestamp, such as a Gregorian-based calendar, which subjects you to the Roman Catholic Church directly as a character within their chronos-based time system, their temporal-based time system, what happens is you've now put on a character that doesn't belong to you. That birth certificate character is not you. It's an infant or it's infancy position that you wear the rest of your life. I mean, it's like if I went out of the house every day dressed as Harry Potter, J.K. Rowling might have a legitimate claim to everything I earned through her character.
Right.
That's what they've done. They got us believing, which is why Journey says don't stop believing, which is why that shitty song was promoted so heavily. I know. But
now it's in my head.
This stuff is so fun when you start to get down to the simplicity and you realize what wholeness actually means. When you realize Luke 5:31 is the only thing you need to know. They that are whole need not a physician. That's so huge because now you don't need to be fixed. You don't need salvation. You don't need to be salvaged. There's nothing about you that anybody can do. By the way, even biblically, it says the spiritual man shall be judged by no man. So even Rome agrees with me that as long as you're spiritual, i.e. inspired, i.e. breathing, because that's all spiritual. That's all spiritual means breathing. To be inspired is to be filled with the breath.
Yeah.
Yes.
So by the way, does a birth certificated decedent estate take a breath?
No.
No, there's no life in it. That's why executors, that's why trusts, that's why all that other nonsense is in play. That's why I don't listen to anybody. When I hear the word trust, how about the in God we trust? Is that for living men?
No.
No. That's the res, the R-E-S, res, deposited, the biological res, the thing, the object, the stone, the marker, the placenta. Res is the object or thing of a trust. Res ID, resident, residence. How about this? This is mind blower. COVID. COVID. Covered identity. COV is the covered infant entity that Health and Human Services created.
Interesting.
And people don't understand. That's why they had to wear the veil, i.e. the mask, because that's the mask of infancy. That's the mask of stupidity. Infants follow or believe that. No offense to anybody, but if you bought into COVID, you're a willful participant.
Indeed.
COVID is COV, covered infant identity. If you know anything about Freud, you realize that the id, ego, and superego, the id is the infant.
Yes.
So COV is covered as an insurance coverage. The insured infant is the cut material, is the piece that was left behind. It stays inside that hospital. It stays in that place, in that institution as the infirm. It actually is a patient forever. And that because it's a patient, it's subjected to Health and Human Services or the healthcare bills or all that health nonsense that they're promoting right now. When I wrote to President Trump the third letter in March of 2020, Within 1 week of that letter, they shut down the global economy because I identified for more than the third time that cut material that they're using as a deposit and surety ship in the entire international banking system is an abortion. Within 1 week of him receiving his third and final letter, COVID, COVID, came out. Because what happened was I took the ability of the world to use, of the international bankers to use that surety as a guarantee payment, because nobody in their right mind would agree that aborted fetal tissue should be on deposit to hold us accountable for their expenditures. So they had to make everybody wear their infancy on the surface or on their face.
Which gives a new meaning to the term face diaper.
It actually, who do you think made that up? You think it's us out here that they're laughing at us.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Of course they are.
They're laughing at us because we don't care enough about reality. And again, that's what I don't want anything to do with anybody out beyond my gate.
Mm.
I am so ashamed of what's happening. I am so ashamed. And believe me, I mean, I was talking to Rose the other day on one of her calls, and I tell her, even you, Rose, I love you very much, but if you buy into flat earth, if you buy into all that shit and promote it, you are failing.
Mm.
Because flat earth is the empty placenta. That gives rise to an XY axis flat piece of paper representing that flat placenta.
Wow.
Even if you look up placenta etymologically, it'll say flat land, flat soil. That's the flat earth. Everybody thinks it's something to do with this giant ball or whatever globe.
Mm-hmm.
I don't even care if it is. I live in 3D. I can't live or exist in a 2D flat plane existence. So even if this is not a globe or a ball, it doesn't matter to me. It's not flat. I exist in a three-dimensional realm. But when you agree to flat earth, to that XY axis, you have chained the spirit, you have chained God to a piece of paper.
Mm.
So that's the birth certificated character. The birth certificated character lives on flat earth.
Interesting.
Hey, you know what? When you start to see it, you see it all.
Yeah.
Because I will never agree that I live in an XY axis. Well, Kurt, but we're talking about. No, you're not. You're promoting exactly what you need them or what they need to promote. If you agree to flat earth, you agree to a piece of paper.
So did we solve the difference between, I don't know if you tackled or you answered the question or we just got sidetracked, what the core difference is between the cut and the natural dissolution of the umbilical cord?
Time. And space.
Okay.
If all of you were in one place at the same moment, then as that material dissolves in and of itself, you're still all you at one place in time and space. When they separate biologically you from you and timestamp it, there's two different positions. So again, if they they would still attempt to do what they do because of the court of public opinion would agree with them. Everybody, hey, we all owe taxes. No, nobody owes taxes. Private property is untaxable. The problem is you're not using private property when you go to work. You're putting on Harry Potter.
Yeah.
So again, everything you earn through that character is not private. It's all collectivized. It's all public. So again, public property is not private. Public property has no claim to privacy, the rights to privacy. Public property is not your property. So there isn't anybody I know besides maybe me that is actually private, because you can only be private from the beginning. and that's fertilization. And the only people that understand that are the ones that understand all present and accounted for, from fertilization to last breath. The fact that I'm breathing, and even in the womb, my mom was breathing for me, but I was still breathing. So I still had spirit, even in the womb. And it's continuity, biological, evolutionary continuity. So one really fun thing is how many years and how hard they've been trying to get people to agree, to either intelligent design or evolution.
Yeah.
Hell, the Scopes trial. Hell, I mean, one thing I would like to say about all these fake court cases, and I mean fake. I think the entire Bar Association, I think the court cases, everything are fake. Not the ones that we experience, but all these big cases like the Scopes trial of 1925. Scopes. Hell, look up the word scope. It actually means something. It's like the extent of something, the scope of something. So the Scopes trial was getting people they were dividing the public on whether intelligent design existed over man coming from monkey. Hell, they even called it the Scopes monkey trial. So your options were you either believe in God or you came from a monkey, because that's how they positioned evolution. Well, nobody understands that the evolutionary process from a single cell to this moment as we speak. Think about how easy that is to understand. Trillions of cellular subdivisions is evolutionary process. I used to live in the water, but now I don't. Think about that. I evolved from a single cell like an amoeba in 9 months to living on the land. That is pure evolutionary process. But they got us to agree that evolution was monkey to man. I mean, how crazy is it even thinking about the birth certificate? Think about that. When they timestamped September 19th, 1960 at 3:50 a.m., that became part of his history.
Right.
Well, inside the womb, tell me what day it is.
Today.
It's prehistoric.
Oh, prehistoric. Yeah, yeah.
It's literally prehistoric. So when they talk about ancient or prehistoric times, in my case, it was a little over 62 years ago.
Right.
Look at how easy this is.
So are you a vessel?
A vessel for the spirit?
Yes.
Yeah, my biology is a container. It's just a vessel. It's I like to think of it as my present home. I don't know where I was before this, and I don't know where I'm going after this, but while I'm here, this is my present home.
Right.
You got that?
We're
Right.
renting it.
Yeah, well, not really, because who you're renting from?
Yeah, I know. I was just being silly.
No, I know the United States or the Crown might actually say you're renting from them.
Exactly.
Because they do have that biology on deposit.
Right.
So you're not renting. I think the word would be lease. You're leasing. That's why when you get out of jail, they say you've been released, because you're leasing back the very biology that they have on deposit.
If we are vessels for the spirit, does that mean that maritime law is applicable to us?
No. Again, think about when they cut the umbilical cord and they leave a piece of you behind in the waters of mother.
Right.
In the waters of mother. Aren't we talking Admiralty Maritime right now?
Yes.
So a piece of you, the vessel, the boat, the ship, the ark, Noah's Ark, for crying out loud. The ark was left behind.
Right.
That's the vessel that they have on deposit.
Okay.
So they have that vessel. They gave it a title, in my case, Kurtis Richard Kallenbach. And of course, since I forgot about it, that vessel became derelict.
Mm.
So it's subject to admiralty. So yeah, and it needs salvage. So they salvage that vessel. I'm trying to think of they salvage it under the term wreck, W-R-E-C-K.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, a wreck. It's a wreck. And that's how they salvage it, because you've abandoned it. You presumably abandoned it. But that's why we win. When you understand that you're still breathing, and when you understand you're still using that vessel, albeit evolved,
Mm-hmm.
when you're still breathing, when you're still using it, have you ever abandoned it?
No.
If you've never abandoned it, then it's not subject to salvage. So admiralty law does not apply to a living man. How about this? That's the state side. What about the church side? Do you need salvation when you're whole?
No.
No. You win on both counts because you understand your godly origin. And by the way, let's explain what's actually happened. When they cut the cord, they had, basically, you were too young to recognize what's going on. And so a piece of you was amputated, giving rise to a phantom limb, believe it or not. Of course, phantom limbs are the things that you feel. Again, if somebody cut off my arm and I still felt that arm existed years later, that's the phantom limb. Well, that's what they did with the umbilical cord, because they gave it a name, they gave it a title. That vessel becomes a phantom limb that haunts you ultimately for your whole life. But getting back to this idea of the church and state problem, God, there's just so much fun stuff to talk about. I'm trying to reel myself in on this. Put it this way, that cut creates a separation of church and state. That's what they did. When everybody they get everybody all frothed up and they said, oh, there's supposed to be a separation of church and state. Well, not really, because your state of mind and your church, the body, the temple, can never be separated. So if you abandon your own sovereignty, your origin, your godly origin, that abandonment would be an abdication from the throne, wouldn't it? And that's what they get us to do. They get us to agree to a birthday or birth certificated character, which is an actual change of government. But also it's sedition, if you take in the sovereignty aspect of it. So you've basically claimed a different government, whether it's a 1789 constitutional government, paper government for commercial vessels, or you choose a church government like the Pope or Catholicism or Christianity, and that government's also a change of government. So either way, you've abandoned your own crown, your own authority by changing governments. That's why self-governance, you would never claim our government, because there is no our government. There's me, my governance, self-governance, you, your self-governance. Where's the our in that? Nowhere. That's why when you have the Christian, so-called Christian mindset, what they call civilized, you actually are responsible. You have yourself under control. This is one of my favorite topics, by the way. Get this visual. The piece of you that, oh my God, there's just so much. The piece of you in the womb it represents your godly origin. Next to God, whatever. Well, that piece was cut off of you. Somebody took it on deposit. Well, it also is the piece that directly links you to your godly origin. So whoever has that piece under control becomes the middleman between you and God. Can you see it?
Mm-hmm.
What do you think the Roman Catholic Church has been claiming since 1302 in Unum Sanctum when they said the human creature is subject to Rome? So Rome is claiming to be the middleman between you and God.
Yep.
So you got to go to the church. You got to go to someplace and bend the knee to reconnect with God when in fact you've never been disconnected.
That's like the Guinness Stout of conversation right there. There's a lot of substance and a lot of nourishment there for sure.
Yes.
You look like you've had a knowledge OD.
It was so good.
Yes.
And a fun fact, I looked out the window at one point and there was an owl that flew by the window. Yeah, because we threw all of that. I threw all that food out, and it was a bird buffet.
I see.
Yeah.
Side note.
Yeah, that was a really cool, a cool affirmation of what we were talking about, and a cool sync.
Yeah. Anyway, it has fantastic things to say, and this interview, like many that I listened to in doing research for this talk, I think that I will have to go back and listen to it a few times because there's just it's so much there. It's so dense. I just need some time and space to parse it out, pause a little bit, think about it, press play again, go back.
It's very emotional for me, and I had to kind of a few times fight back the tears because he's talking about what our birthright is and something that has been taken away from us, and it's certainly not a contract or an agreement that we made.
Yeah.
That was made for us, and it's been multiple generations, and I think that there's a grieving process that happens when you realize what your birthright is and how that has been to some degree stolen from us. And so to feel empowered in that it's possible to, remake that link and recreate that bond, it's really a beautiful feeling, but it does take some forgiveness.
That's for sure. Yeah. He's obviously very, very passionate about it, which is, I would assume, his driving force for doing all of this extensive research. My God. And he just seems to have it all at the tip of his tongue. He can just espouse it and articulate it in a way faster than I can receive it. But yeah, I'm in awe of his work and his research. I would love to see a time lapse of how all of that unfurled and how he came to the place that he is today. Yeah, fascinating stuff.
Starting with the Tays.
Yeah.
What a cool film that would be, seeing someone wake up. That's really how I saw it, is that he was kind of walking asleep in his life, and I know nothing about him at all, nothing. So it's almost like his life started that day.
Yeah. Or restarted, like it was a big landmark. He woke up, he stopped sleepwalking, and
yeah. Heavy.
Yeah, I know.
Heavy
it's
duty.
Still bouncing around in my head. I'm more pondering it than I am actually paying as much attention to my words as I should be. But amazing stuff, and it's pretty obvious that he'll be back. The territory is so big, it will take a while to map it, and he's obviously still in the process of mapping it, although he has a super vast chunk of it already mapped.
It's funny because obviously you guys can't see us, but when the interview started, in our office, we have a couple of windows, and I was looking out the window, and Chris poked me a couple of times, like, what are you doing? Like, you have your head turned the other way. And I was so absorbed in what was being said. I felt like I needed to give his words my full attention. Like I couldn't not that I do this, but I couldn't wander off in my mind. And it really took like every ounce of my energy to focus on what he was saying, to really absorb it. And I believe that it's because it's like hearing the word of God. Like, you know what is the truth, you know what's real and what's not. And when you're speaking to someone that is vibrating at a higher frequency, it really does raise your frequency, and it does cause you to have to tune in very, very directly and very specifically to what is being said. And I felt like there was some direct knowledge that was being passed to us. And it's such a magical thing to have this forum to be able to do that. And it does feel like a huge honor to have someone speak and in such a deep way. Like, I just was in awe of him.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
And he's a man. He's really just a man. But
in this in this context, that of just being a man it's a pretty big thing. I think that's part of the problem, and why we tend to, as we were speaking about, deny the first 9 months of life, which is in a sense to deny the spark of life. Our spirit is that goes hand in hand with how we've sort of been minimalized as sort of random products of something that may or may not have occurred, and which makes you feel insignificant, which I think is there's something very intentional behind that, for us to feel insignificant and that our actions don't matter. And we've talked about it, and we bring it up almost every time on the show, whether it's during the interview or in the after babble. But I think this speaks to that importance. And as he parses out his words and makes sure that him and who he's speaking with is saying what they mean, all of these actions that we take for granted, birth, now people schedule their fucking births and get their babies cut out. He ascribes so much meaning and baggage and substance to all of these actions that we've long taken for granted. I think that's part of the thing that sort of puts me, when I listen to him say this stuff, puts me in an altered state of mind, because it's grappling not only something that I really haven't given a whole lot of thought about, at least in this manner, but it just, that in turn shifts everything that comes after it. Thinking about the birth process, or not even the birth process, but the whole process of fertilization and everything that happens after that, that just puts everything in a different context, which it takes a lot of mind space to just try and navigate.
Yeah, I think one thing I was trying to land on was why the baby cries. And he conjectured that it's because cutting the cord hurts. And I would agree with that. But I also think that it's that initial separation and realization of that separation, and there's a longing. And I think what the predators have done is to basically exploit that longing. And how that's been exploited is with the media and with these kind of false gods and these false idols and things that are supposed to replace that loss, and it doesn't work. So I think that that's why there's this tremendous sense of depression and sadness and grief that people feel throughout their life, and they can't quite nail what it is. But I think it comes from the process of losing that twin, losing that other side of yourself, and that thing being destroyed. So, just without any ceremony whatsoever, so unceremoniously.
I think it hits home with me too in a very visceral sense, is because I cut the cords of both of my sons. So I made that cut myself twice, unknowingly.
Yeah. And I had a very traumatic birth. My birth process was extremely traumatic and long and arduous and painful. And I think that, again, there's something there that you feel that disconnect. So I can see from your perspective how that would be very painful because you made that cut. But again, it was out of ignorance. It's because you didn't know, like, you were being given an honor by doing that. That's kind of how that's being presented, like to draw the father into that process.
Yes, I did it on the prompting of the midwife. Like, this is the first step you take when you are pushing your baby towards its first breath. So obviously I didn't think twice about it. I wouldn't even have known where to research that. Had I even known that it was something to research about the implications of all of that. I was ignorant on many levels, but there's nothing I can do about it now except educate myself and have conversations like this and put them out so other people can listen to them and perhaps not choose to do the same thing.
Yeah, I guess where I still feel a little bit lost and confused is how that process, like, what is the chronology of that process? What is actually supposed to happen? So
if you don't cut,
like how does that work? Like, what does that look like for the mother?
I can tell you. The afterbirth placenta soon follows after the baby, and you just keep it until it falls off naturally, which can take 1 to 3 days, I think.
Right. So then the baby and the mother are connected until the umbilical cord falls off, like it just withers away. Like, don't.
Yeah. No, they're not connected. The umbilical cord is connected to the placenta.
Right. So, but what happened? I'm saying, like, so what? You just carry this around with the baby, like, and then, but how is the belly button formed?
Because the umbilical cord, the baby will be attached to the umbilical cord, which will be attached to the
the placenta. So then it just falls off, and then there, right? But don't you have to tie a knot there? Like, isn't that what the doctor does? Or
what the fuck does the doctor know?
I don't know. That's why I'm trying to ask, because I don't know.
No, I mean, you would do. What did people do in caves back in the 40s?
I wasn't there. I don't know.
They just let it, I assume they just let it take its course, let nature take its course and not interfere with that. And I would assume, it falls off. Definitely. Just like when you cut an umbilical cord, there's still a piece that's hanging out of the navel. You don't cut it at the navel. So, and then that just, after a while, falls off. It's actually quite small.
I still don't understand. But it's okay.
We'll have it back on again.
We're 15 minutes in to me not understanding, so it's okay.
There's time. It's a process.
I just have a weird belly button. I have a deep innie.
That's true.
I think they tied a really tight knot with me, and maybe that's why I feel confused.
I can put a shot glass in her belly button. Pretty intense. I've lost things in there.
I can actually smoke a cigar from it and blow it out my...
Like an abdomen tracheotomy? Okay, this is going south.
I can blow it out my mouth. I can blow smoke rings out of my mouth from my belly button. It's a parlor trick.
Thank you so much for listening. This was a fantastic conversation. I hope that you were able to glean some knowledge from it. I certainly did. And again, I'm going to have to go over it a few times with a fine-tooth comb and parse out everything was said. I was hard to catch everything as it was happening. But yeah, thank you, Kurtis, for coming on. And thank you all for listening. And yeah, as always, there's great stuff coming down the pipeline. So stay tuned. If you would like to contact us for casserole recipes, guest requests, or
explain the belly button to
praise,
me.
Praise or criticism, you can do that via the Melt Podcast at protonmail.com or
hunter-muse@protonmail.com.
Sounded like you were inside my ear. And yeah, all the other info that you need to know is in the episode notes. So tons of links there and on how to get to Kurtis's stuff. And I can't wait to listen to his podcast.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
All right, guys.
Until next time, we love you.
Women, men.
Living men and women.
Living, all of you, living alive.
We love you. And we'll see you on down the road.
Meow.
To hear the full-length version of this episode, get access to exclusive and early episodes, and participate in our monthly Zoom meetups for as little as $3 per month, just click the Patreon link in the episode notes or visit patreon.com/themeltpodcast. Contributing financially will help to make this podcast my full-time gig that I can devote more time to and allow me to create more content. Other ways of contributing would be giving us a favorable review or rating wherever you get your podcasts, subscribing to us on YouTube, spreading the word wherever you and your tribe congregate, or just by sending us your positive thoughts and intentions. In a quantumly intertwined and holographic multiverse, these also go a long way. Thank you.